can't remember the last time I felt this happy.
Me neither.
Me neither.
It feels perfect, doesn't it?
The restaurant was one of those places where reservations had to be made months in advance, where the lighting was deliberately dim and intimate, where every plate arrived looking like a small work of art. Sterling Jameson sat at a corner table, his phone face down beside his water glass, his attention split between the menu and the elegant woman sitting across from him. Her name was Raven Sinclair, and she was 28 years old, 8 years younger than Sterling, with the kind of beauty that turned heads in crowded rooms. She wore a black cocktail dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, and when she laughed at something Sterling said, it sounded like music designed specifically for his ears. What Sterling did not know, what he could not have known as he reached across the table to take Raven's hand with the confidence of a man who believed he was getting away with something, was that his wife was sitting 3 tables away. Octavia Jameson sat with her back to her husband, positioned perfectly so that he would not see her, but she could see him reflected in the ornate mirror that covered the restaurant's east wall. She was not alone. Sitting across from her was her best friend since college, a woman named Valencia Cross, and beside Valencia sat her husband, a private investigator named Donovan, who had spent the past 2 months documenting every dinner, every hotel check-in, every lie Sterling had told to cover his tracks. Octavia was 34 years old, a full-figured woman with rich brown skin, natural hair she wore in elegant twists, one in a face that carried both gentleness and an iron will inherited from her grandmother. She had been married to Sterling for 6 years, together for 8, and for the past 4 months she had known with absolute certainty that her husband was having an affair. She had known and she had said nothing, not out of weakness or denial, but because she was planning something that would require patience, precision, and perfect timing. Tonight was the first act of that plan. Sterling had told Octavia he was working late, closing a deal with a potential client for his consulting firm. It was the same excuse he had used 17 times in the past 3 months, the same lie delivered with the same casual confidence of a man who believed his wife was too trusting, too comfortable, too secure in their marriage to question him. When he had kissed Octavia on the forehead that evening before leaving their home in the suburbs of Atlanta, told her not to wait up, and driven straight to this restaurant to meet the woman he had been seeing since last spring. What he did not know was that Octavia had access to his credit card statements, his phone records, his email accounts, all legally obtained through the joint accounts they shared, and the cloud backup he had foolishly never password protected. She knew about Raven. She knew Raven worked as a marketing coordinator at a firm Sterling's company sometimes partnered with. She knew they had met at a conference in Miami. She knew Sterling had paid for Raven's apartment upgrade 3 months ago, that he had bought her jewelry, and that he had taken her to places he used to take Octavia back when their relationship was new, and he still tried to impress her. Octavia knew all of this, and she had done absolutely nothing to stop it. Instead, she had called Valencia, who had called Donovan, and together they had built a case so airtight that when the time came, Sterling would have no room to deny, deflect, or gaslight his way out of what he had done. But tonight was not about confrontation. Tonight was about observation. Tonight was about letting Sterling think he was still in control, while Octavia quietly gathered the last pieces of evidence she needed. Now, if you are watching this and your pulse is already racing, if you can feel the anticipation building and you need to know what Octavia does next, then stop right now and hit that subscribe button. So here is something most people do not realize. The majority of viewers who watch Philly Folktales videos have not subscribed to this channel. They watch, they feel every emotion, they get invested in these stories, and then they move on without joining the community. Do not be one of those people. This channel is built on stories that matter, stories about real people facing real betrayals and finding real strength. Subscribe right now and be part of that community. Smash that like button because it genuinely helps more people find these stories. And drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. Atlanta, Houston, Detroit, London, Amsterdam. I want to hear from every single one of you, because what happens next in Octavia's story is something you will never forget. Octavia had not always been the woman sitting calmly in a restaurant watching her husband romance another woman. 6 years ago, when she married Sterling, she had been deeply in love, convinced that they were building something extraordinary together. Sterling was charming, ambitious, successful in his career as a business consultant. He came from a good family in Savannah, had gone to Morehouse, had all the markers of a man who was going somewhere. Octavia, who had graduated from Spelman with a degree in sociology and worked as a program director for a nonprofit serving at-risk youth, had believed they were partners, two people with shared values building a shared life. The first few years had been good. They bought a house together in a quiet suburb. They traveled. They talked about having children someday, as though they were both focused on their careers and agreed there was no rush. Octavia's work was demanding but fulfilling. She ran after-school programs, secured grants, mentored teenage girls who reminded her of herself at that age, smart and ambitious but lacking the resources and guidance to reach their potential. Sterling supported her work, or at least he claimed to, attending fundraisers and nodding along when she talked about the kids she worked with. But somewhere around year 3, things shifted. Sterling's business began to take off. He started traveling more, working longer hours, bringing in bigger clients and bigger paychecks. The money was good, better than good, and it changed him in ways Octavia did not fully recognize until much later. He became more concerned with appearances, with status, and with being seen at the right places with the right people. He started making comments about Octavia's work, subtle at first, suggesting that maybe she did not need to work quite so hard, that maybe they could afford for her to step back, that maybe a nonprofit salary was beneath what a woman married to someone of his stature should be earning. Octavia had pushed back gently but firmly. She loved her work. She was not going to walk away from it just because Sterling's ego had inflated along with his bank account. And for a while he seemed to accept that, though the comments never fully stopped. They just became quieter, more insidious, little digs wrapped in concern or humor that slowly eroded Octavia's sense of being valued for who she was, rather than how she reflected on him. Then came the affair, where Octavia had suspected something was wrong for months before she found proof. Sterling was distant, distracted, always on his phone, always with an excuse for why he could not be fully present. When she tried to talk to him about it, he dismissed her concerns, told her she was being paranoid, that work was stressful and she should be more understanding. The gaslighting was textbook, so smooth in practice that Octavia had almost believed him, almost convinced herself that she was imagining problems where none existed. But then she found the receipt, a jewelry purchase for $2,000 made on a day Sterling had told her he was in meetings all day. She had not received any jewelry. She checked his credit card statement and found more. Hotel rooms when he was supposedly working late at the office. He had dinners at expensive restaurants on nights he claimed to be eating takeout at his desk. Purchases at stores Octavia had never set foot in. She could have confronted him then. Part of her wanted to, but another part, the part that had learned hard lessons about power and strategy from years of navigating underfunded nonprofits and hostile bureaucracies, told her to wait. Confronting Sterling without a plan would give him the opportunity to lie, to manipulate, to turn the situation around on her the way he had done so many times before. So instead, she called Valencia. Valencia Cross had been Octavia's roommate at Spelman, her maid of honor at the wedding, the sister she never had by blood but claimed by choice. Valencia was a corporate lawyer, sharp as a blade and twice as decisive, and she had never fully trusted Sterling. When Octavia called her that night and told her what she had found, Valencia did not waste time with platitudes or false hope. "You need evidence," Valencia said. "Real, documented, undeniable evidence. And you need a plan for what you are going to do with it." Valencia's husband Donovan was a private investigator who specialized in corporate fraud, but also handled domestic cases. Within a week, he was following Sterling, documenting every meeting with Raven, every lie, every moment Sterling thought no one was watching. The evidence piled up quickly. Photos of Sterling and Raven holding hands at outdoor cafes. Video footage of them checking into hotels under Sterling's name. Copies of texts and emails Donovan obtained through legal means that Octavia did not fully understand, but trusted were admissible if it ever came to court. In Ryan, it would come to court. Because Octavia was not just planning to leave Sterling, She was planning to dismantle the life he had built on lies, piece by piece, with the same meticulous care he had used to deceive her. But first, she needed to understand exactly who Raven Sinclair was. Not just the surface facts, the job title and the expensive taste in clothes, but the deeper truth. Was Raven a willing participant in breaking up a marriage? Did she know Sterling was married? Did she care? Donovan had done his homework. Raven Sinclair was 28, originally from Birmingham, Alabama. She had moved to Atlanta 3 years ago for work. She was ambitious, social media savvy, and from what Donovan could gather, had no idea Sterling was married. Sterling had been careful. He never wore his wedding ring around Raven. And he had told her he was single, that he was focused on his career, and had not found the right person to settle down with until now. Raven believed she was dating an eligible bachelor, a successful businessman who was attentive and generous in everything she had been looking for. When Octavia learned this, something shifted in her. She had expected to hate Raven, to see her as a villain in the story of her marriage falling apart. But Raven was not a villain. She was another victim of Sterling's lies, just in a different way. And that realization changed everything about how Octavia planned to handle what came next. Sitting in the restaurant now, watching Sterling laugh with Raven, watching him play the role of the attentive boyfriend with the same charm he had once used on her, Octavia felt something cold and clear settle in her chest. Not rage, though there was some of that underneath. Not heartbreak, though that was there too, buried deep. What she felt most acutely was resolve. Sterling had underestimated her. He had assumed that because she was kind, because she was patient, because she loved him, that she was weak. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Valencia leaned across the table and squeezed Octavia's hand. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "I am perfect," Octavia said, and she meant it. Donovan, who had been discreetly taking photos with a camera disguised as a regular phone case, set the device down and looked at Octavia with something close to respect. "You have more self-control than most people I have worked with," he said. "Most spouses would have caused a scene by now." "Scenes are not my style," Octavia said. "I want something better than a scene. Now I want justice." They finished their meal, paid, and left the restaurant before Sterling and Raven had even ordered dessert. As Octavia walked out into the cool Atlanta night, she felt lighter than she had in months. The hardest part, the waiting and watching and pretending, was almost over. Now came the part where she took her life back. The next morning, Octavia woke early and went for a run through her neighborhood, something she did most mornings to clear her head. Sterling was still asleep when she left, having come home late the night before, smelling faintly of expensive perfume that was not hers. He had kissed her on the cheek, told her the client meeting had gone well, and fallen asleep within minutes, oblivious to the fact that his wife had watched him seduce another woman just hours earlier. Octavia ran 5 miles, her mind working through the steps of what came next. She had the evidence. She had the lawyer Valencia had recommended, a divorce attorney named Simone Okafor, who had a reputation for being both compassionate and ruthless when the situation required it. She had a plan for her finances, for the house, for how she would rebuild her life after this chapter ended. What she did not have yet was the perfect moment to reveal everything. She needed something that would make an impact, something that would ensure Sterling understood the full weight of what he had done. She thought about it as she ran, as her feet hit the pavement in a steady rhythm, as the sunrise painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. And then it came to her. Sterling's company was hosting a gala in 2 weeks, in a black tie event to celebrate their 10th anniversary and attract new investors. Sterling had been planning it for months, had talked endlessly about how important it was, how many influential people would be there, how it could take his business to the next level. He had asked Octavia weeks ago if she would attend as his date, and she had agreed, not because she wanted to support him anymore, but because she knew it would be the perfect stage. Octavia smiled as she ran the last mile home. She knew exactly what she was going to do. Over the next 2 weeks, Octavia prepared meticulously. She met with Simone Okafor, who reviewed all the evidence Donovan had gathered and confirmed that Octavia had an airtight case for divorce. Georgia was not a no-fault state when it came to alimony, which meant Sterling's adultery could be used against him in the settlement. Octavia was entitled to a significant portion of their shared assets, and given that Sterling had used marital funds to finance his affair, purchasing gifts and paying for hotel rooms and dinners, Simone was confident they could argue for even more. But Octavia was not interested in taking Sterling to the cleaners financially. She was not motivated by greed or revenge in the petty sense. She just wanted what was fair, what she had earned through 6 years of partnership and support, and she wanted Sterling to face the consequences of his choices in a way that could not be ignored or minimized. She also did something unexpected. She reached out to Raven, not directly, not yet, but through Donovan, who arranged for an anonymous package to be delivered to Raven's apartment. Inside the package was a single photograph of Sterling and Octavia on their wedding day, both of them smiling, both of them looking genuinely happy. On the back of the photo, Octavia had written a single sentence in her careful handwriting. Ask him about the woman in this picture. It was a risk. Raven could ignore it, could throw it away, could tell Sterling about it. But Octavia was betting on Raven's intelligence, on the likelihood that a woman who had been lied to would want to know the truth once she had reason to suspect she had been deceived. 2 days after the package was delivered, Donovan reported back. Raven had confronted Sterling. There had been a loud argument in the parking lot of Raven's apartment complex, witnessed by neighbors. Myra Sterling had tried to lie, had told Raven the photo was from years ago, that the marriage had ended, that Octavia was his ex-wife. But Raven was not stupid. She had done what any smart woman in the digital age would do. She had looked Octavia up on social media, had seen recent photos of Sterling and Octavia together at family events, had found their address listed on public property records, had confirmed that they were still very much married. Raven had ended things with Sterling on the spot. When Octavia heard this, she felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that Raven now knew the truth, sadness for the pain Raven must be feeling, and a grim satisfaction that Sterling's carefully constructed double life was beginning to crumble. But Sterling did not tell Octavia about the breakup. He came home that night acting as if nothing had changed, kissed her hello, asked about her day, played the role of the devoted husband. Octavia played along, smiled, made dinner, asked about his work, all the while knowing that in less than a week, at the gala he had worked so hard to plan, everything he thought he knew about his life was going to fall apart. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that felt like a blessing. The event was being held at a historic mansion in Buckhead that had been converted into an event space, all soaring ceilings and marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked manicured gardens lit with thousands of tiny white lights. Sterling had rented the space for an astronomical sum, determined to make a statement, to show everyone in Atlanta's business community that his consulting firm had arrived, that he was a player, that he belonged in the same rooms as the city's elite. Octavia arrived with Sterling in a car service he had arranged, stepping out onto the red carpet in a gown that made her feel like royalty. The dress was deep emerald green, fitted perfectly to her curves, with a neckline that was elegant without being revealing, and a skirt that moved like water when she walked. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo that had taken hours at the salon. Her makeup was flawless. She wore diamond earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, the only piece of expensive jewelry she owned that Sterling had not bought for her. She looked stunning. She knew it. More importantly, she felt powerful. Sterling held her arm as they walked into the venue, smiling at guests, introducing Octavia to investors and clients and business associates. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect couple. Sterling in his tailored tuxedo, confident and charismatic, and Octavia on his arm, beautiful and poised, the ideal wife for a man on his way up. What no one knew was that Octavia had arranged for 2 additional guests to attend the gala. Valencia and Donovan were seated at a table near the back of the ballroom, dressed in formal attire, blending seamlessly with the other guests. And sitting at another table, carefully positioned so that she would have a clear view of the main stage, was Simone Okafor, Octavia's divorce attorney. There not as legal counsel, but as a witness to what was about to unfold. The evening progressed smoothly. Dinner was served, a 5-course meal that was exquisite and probably wasted on most of the people there, who were more focused on networking than eating. There were speeches, toasts, a presentation about the company's growth and future plans. Sterling was in his element, working the room, shaking hands, making promises and projections about where the business would go in the next decade. And then came the moment Octavia had been waiting for. The master of ceremonies, a local news anchor Sterling had hired for the evening, invited Sterling to the stage for a final speech. Sterling stood, buttoned his tuxedo jacket, and walked confidently to the microphone set up at the front of the ballroom. The room quieted. All eyes turned toward him. Sterling began his speech with practiced ease, thanking everyone for coming, sure, thanking his team for their hard work, thanking the investors for their faith in his vision. He was charming, articulate, every inch the successful businessman. And then, about 5 minutes into the speech, he did something Octavia had hoped he would do, but could not have predicted with certainty. He gestured toward Octavia. "I also want to thank my beautiful wife, Octavia," Sterling said, his voice warm and seemingly sincere. "She has been my rock, my support system, the woman who has stood by me through every challenge and every success. I could not have built this company without her. Octavia, would you come up here for a moment?" Octavia felt every eye in the room turn toward her. She stood slowly, smoothing her dress, and walked toward the stage with the same grace and poise she had carried all evening. She climbed the steps. He accepted Sterling's outstretched hand and stood beside him at the microphone, smiling at the crowd. Sterling put his arm around her waist. "Everyone, my incredible wife, Octavia Jameson." The room applauded. Octavia smiled, waved slightly, and then did something Sterling did not expect. She gently removed his arm from her waist, stepped closer to the microphone, and began to speak. "Thank you, Sterling, for those kind words," Octavia said, her voice calm and clear, amplified through the sound system so that every person in the ballroom could hear her. "I appreciate being acknowledged, and since we are acknowledging things tonight, I thought this would be the perfect time to share something with all of you." Sterling's smile faltered slightly. He looked at Octavia with confusion and the first hint of alarm. Octavia turned to face the crowd fully, her expression serene. "For the past 4 months, I have known that my husband has been having an affair. Her name is Raven Sinclair. She is a lovely young woman who, until very recently, had no idea that Sterling was married. Sterling told her he was single. He took her to many of the same restaurants he used to take me to when we were dating. He bought her jewelry with money from our joint account. He spent nights with her in hotels and then came home to me and lied about where he had been." The ballroom went completely silent. Not the polite quiet of people listening to a speech, but the shocked, breathless silence of people witnessing something they know they will talk about for years. Sterling's face had gone ashen. He reached for Octavia's arm. "Octavia, what are you doing?" She stepped smoothly away from him, keeping her focus on the audience. "I am telling the truth, Sterling. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do." She reached into the small clutch purse she had carried with her and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She opened it carefully and held it up for the crowd to see. It was one of the photos Donovan had taken, printed on high-quality paper, showing Sterling and Raven holding hands across a restaurant table. Both of them smiling, both of them clearly intimate. "This was taken 6 weeks ago," Octavia said. "There are many more where this came from. I have documentation of every lie, every hotel room, every expense. I have it all, and I have filed for divorce." The room erupted, not in applause but in shocked murmurs, gasps, was the sound of 200 people trying to process what they had just heard. Sterling stood frozen at the microphone, his mouth open, his face a mask of horror and disbelief. Octavia turned to face him directly for the first time since stepping onto the stage. "You thought you could have it both ways, Sterling. You thought you could have your wife at home, supporting you, making you look good, and your mistress on the side, making you feel young and exciting. You thought I would never find out. Or maybe you thought I would find out but stay quiet, because that is what you have always assumed about me. That I am too nice, too forgiving, too afraid of making a scene." Her voice remained calm, steady, but there was steel underneath. "You were wrong. I am not afraid of the truth. I am not afraid of this moment. I am not going to spend one more day of my life married to a man who sees me as a convenience rather than a partner." She set the photo down on the podium, turned, and walked off the stage with the same grace she had walked onto it. The room watched in stunned silence as she descended the steps, walked through the center of the ballroom, and headed toward the exit. Valencia stood and followed, as did Donovan and Simone. The four of them walked out together, leaving Sterling standing alone on stage in front of 200 witnesses to his humiliation. Outside in the cool night air, Octavia finally let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, but she felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years. Valencia pulled her into a fierce hug. "You are the baddest woman I have ever known," she said, her voice thick with emotion and pride. Donovan nodded. "That was legendary, absolutely legendary." Simone, ever the professional, smiled. "And legally sound. You did not defame him. You stated facts. Facts we can prove in court." "Well done, Octavia." Octavia laughed, a real, genuine laugh that came from somewhere deep and free. "Can we get out of here?" she asked. They went to Valencia's house, where Valencia's teenage daughter had been babysitting Valencia's younger kids. The daughter took one look at the four adults walking in, dressed in formal wear, and knew immediately that something significant had happened. "Auntie Octavia, did you do the thing?" the girl asked, her eyes wide. "I did the thing," Octavia confirmed. The girl whooped, threw her arms around Octavia and said, "You are my hero." They stayed up late, and eating pizza out of the box, drinking wine, and going over everything that had happened. Octavia's phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from Sterling, which she ignored. Around midnight, Valencia convinced her to turn the phone off entirely. "He does not deserve your attention right now," Valencia said. "Let him sit with what he did." The next morning, Octavia woke up in Valencia's guest room to find her phone flooded with messages. Not just from Sterling, though there were plenty of those, but from people who had been at the gala, from friends and acquaintances, and even a few reporters who had somehow gotten her number. The story had already spread through Atlanta's social circles like wildfire. There were messages of support from people Octavia barely knew, women telling her she was brave, men saying Sterling had gotten what he deserved. But there were also messages from Sterling's family, his mother and sisters, angry and defensive, accusing Octavia of humiliating their family, of airing private matters in public, of being vindictive and cruel. Octavia read through them all once, then deleted every single one. She did not owe Sterling's family an explanation or an apology. She had done nothing wrong. Sterling had betrayed their marriage, and she had simply told the truth about it in a way that ensured he could not lie or manipulate his way out of the consequences. The divorce proceedings moved forward quickly. Sterling tried to fight the settlement terms, tried to argue that Octavia was entitled to less because she had humiliated him publicly. Simone shut that argument down immediately, while pointing out that Sterling had humiliated himself through his own actions, and that Octavia had every right to speak truthfully about her own life. Moreover, the public nature of the revelation did not change the legal facts of the case. Sterling had committed adultery, had used marital funds to finance the affair, and had lied repeatedly to his wife. Under Georgia law, Octavia was entitled to an equitable share of their assets and substantial alimony. Within 3 months, the divorce was finalized. Octavia received a fair settlement that gave her financial security while she figured out her next steps. She kept the house, which she promptly sold because she had no desire to live in a space so full of memories she no longer wanted. She used part of the proceeds to buy a smaller, brighter condo closer to downtown Atlanta, in a space that was entirely hers, decorated to her taste, filled with light and plants and art she actually loved. She also did something else. She reached out to Raven. It took courage. Raven had every reason to want nothing to do with Octavia, to see her as part of the painful chapter with Sterling that Raven was trying to move past. But Octavia felt it was important for both of them to have a conversation without Sterling in the middle of it. They met for coffee at a quiet cafe on a Saturday morning. Raven arrived looking nervous and guarded, and Octavia could not blame her. This was awkward at best, potentially painful at worst. "Thank you for meeting me," Octavia said once they were seated. Raven nodded. "I almost did not come, but I figured you deserve to say whatever you need to say." "I do not need to say much," Octavia said. "Mostly I wanted to tell you that I do not blame you. Sterling lied to you the same way he lied to me. You were a victim of his deception too." Raven's eyes filled with tears. "I had no idea he was married. I swear to you, I had no idea. I know, Octavia said gently. I believe you. They talked for over an hour. Raven shared her side of the story, how Sterling had pursued her, how attentive and romantic he had been, how completely she had believed his lies. She told Octavia about the moment she received the wedding photo, about confronting Sterling, about the sick feeling of realizing she had been complicit, however unknowingly, in breaking up a marriage. I am so sorry, Raven said, wiping her eyes. And I know that does not fix anything, but I am so, so sorry. I forgive you, Octavia said, and she meant it. You did not owe me loyalty. Sterling did, and he failed both of us. When they parted ways, Octavia felt another piece of the past release its hold on her. Raven was not her enemy. Raven was another woman who had been hurt by the same man, and there was no reason for them to carry animosity toward each other when the real culprit was Sterling. 6 months after the gala, Octavia was thriving in ways she had not anticipated. Her work at the nonprofit had taken on new energy. She had been promoted to executive director, overseeing all programs and operations, and under her leadership, the organization secured its largest grant to date, funding that would allow them to expand services to 3 additional neighborhoods. She also started speaking publicly about her experience, not in a sensational way, but in service of other women who were navigating similar situations. She was invited to lead workshops on financial literacy for women leaving marriages, on recognizing emotional abuse, on rebuilding identity after divorce. She discovered that her story, painful as it had been to live through, had value for others who needed to know they were not alone. And then, a year after the divorce, Octavia met someone. His name was Langston Elijah Porter. He was 42, a professor of African American history at a local university, with warm eyes and an easy laugh and a gentleness that immediately put Octavia at ease. They met at a community event her nonprofit was hosting, was a fundraiser where Langston had been invited to give a short talk about the history of Black education in the South. Octavia was not looking for a relationship. She had spent the past year intentionally single, focusing on herself, on her work, on healing. But Langston was different. He did not pursue her aggressively or try to impress her with grand gestures. He simply asked if he could take her to coffee to talk more about her work, and when they sat down together, he listened with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions, and treated her like someone whose ideas mattered. They became friends first, then slowly, carefully, something more. Langston was patient, respectful, willing to move at whatever pace Octavia needed. He had been through his own divorce years earlier and understood the importance of rebuilding trust slowly and intentionally. I am not in a hurry, he told her one evening as they walked through Piedmont Park after dinner. I like who you are. I like spending time with you. Whatever happens next, I am here. Octavia felt something unfold in her chest, something warm and hopeful that she had thought Sterling had killed. But it was still there. She was still capable of connection, of vulnerability, of opening her heart to someone new. By the time 18 months had passed since the gala, Octavia's life looked completely different from the one she had lived with Sterling. She had a career she was passionate about. She had a home that was truly hers. She had rebuilt her sense of self from the ground up. And she had Langston, steady and kind and present in ways Sterling had never been. 2 years after the gala, Octavia was at a restaurant celebrating her promotion to executive director when she saw Sterling for the first time since the divorce was finalized. He was across the room, seated at a table with a woman Octavia did not recognize. And when their eyes met, Sterling's expression went through a series of rapid changes. Shock, discomfort, something that might have been shame. Octavia smiled politely and turned back to her own table, where Langston sat across from her, Valencia and Donovan beside them, and several colleagues from the nonprofit filling out the rest of the seats. She did not feel anger seeing Sterling. She did not feel sadness. She felt nothing but a mild curiosity about how his life had turned out. Later that evening, as Octavia and Langston were leaving, Sterling approached them in the parking lot. Octavia tensed slightly, but Langston placed a gentle hand on her lower back, a quiet reassurance that he was there. Octavia, Sterling said, his voice careful. Can I talk to you for a minute? That depends, Octavia said. What do you want to say? Sterling glanced at Langston, clearly uncomfortable. I just wanted to tell you that I am sorry. For everything. I handled things terribly. I hurt you, and I have regretted it every day since. Octavia studied him for a moment. He looked older, more worn than she remembered. The confidence that had always defined him seemed dimmed, replaced by something smaller and more uncertain. I appreciate that, Octavia said finally. And I forgive you, Sterling, not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger does not serve me. But I want you to understand something. You did not just hurt me with your lies. You hurt yourself. You had something real, something valuable, and you threw it away because you thought you could do better. I hope you have learned from that. I hope you treat the people in your life with more honesty and respect than you treated me. Sterling nodded, his eyes glistening slightly. You look happy, he said quietly. I am, Octavia said, genuinely happy, and I hope you find that too. She took Langston's hand, and they walked to the car together, leaving Sterling standing alone in the parking lot. On the drive home, Langston asked if she was okay. I am more than okay, Octavia said. I am free. 3 years after the gala, Octavia and Langston got engaged. When he proposed on a quiet Sunday morning in her condo, with no grand gestures or public spectacles, just a simple, heartfelt question asked while they were making breakfast together. I love you, Langston said, and I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me? Octavia said yes without hesitation. This time the yes felt completely different from the one she had given Sterling all those years ago. This yes came from a place of wholeness, of knowing exactly who she was and exactly what she wanted. She was not looking for someone to complete her. She was choosing to walk beside someone who respected her, valued her, and saw her for who she truly was. They married in a small, intimate ceremony at a garden venue outside Atlanta. 50 people attended, all of them people who genuinely loved and supported them. Octavia wore a dress she chose herself, simple and elegant, and when she looked at Langston standing under the arbor, she felt nothing but peace and joy. Valencia stood beside her as maid of honor, and during the reception, she pulled Octavia aside for a private moment. I am so proud of you, Valencia said, her voice thick with emotion. From that night in the restaurant watching Sterling, to now you have been the strongest, most graceful person I have ever known. I learned from the best, Octavia said, pulling her friend into a tight hug. 4 years after the gala, Octavia received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from Raven. The letter was short but heartfelt. Raven wrote that she had moved to a new city, started a new job. Erin was in therapy working through the trust issues that had come from being deceived so thoroughly. She thanked Octavia for the grace she had shown in their coffee meeting years earlier, for not blaming her, for helping her see that she was not defined by the mistakes of being with the wrong person. You showed me what real strength looks like, Raven wrote. Not revenge, not bitterness, but the courage to walk away with your dignity intact. I am working every day to become the kind of woman who handles adversity with the grace you did. Thank you for that example. I hope you are living the beautiful life you deserve. Octavia read the letter twice, then carefully filed it away. She appreciated Raven's words, appreciated the closure they offered, and she hoped Raven found healing and happiness. 5 years after the gala, Octavia was asked to give a keynote speech at a conference for women in nonprofit leadership. The theme was resilience, and the organizers wanted her to share her story of rebuilding after personal and professional challenges. She agreed, and on a warm spring morning, standing in front of 400 women, Octavia told her story. Not the sensational parts, though she did not shy away from the facts. She talked about the years of feeling undervalued in her marriage. She talked about the moment she discovered the affair and the decision she made to gather evidence rather than react emotionally. She talked about the gala and what it had meant to take control of her own narrative. But mostly she talked about what came after, the work of healing, the therapy, the rebuilding of self-worth, the slow, deliberate process of learning to trust again, to open her heart again, to believe that she deserved real partnership and real love. I could have let what Sterling did define me, Octavia said, her voice clear and strong. I could have let it make me bitter or closed off or afraid. But I chose something different. I chose to see it as information about what I would not accept anymore, information about what I truly deserved, and that information set me free. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Women stood, some were crying, and afterward, dozens of women approached her to share their own stories, to thank her for speaking truth, to tell her that they had found courage in her example. One woman around Octavia's age gripped her hand tightly and said, I have been in a marriage like yours for 10 years. Watching you stand up there and talk about walking away, about choosing yourself, I think you just gave me permission to do the same thing. You do not need my permission, Octavia told her gently. You just need to trust that you are worth more than what you have settled for. And you are. I promise you, you are. 6 years after the gala, Octavia and Langston celebrated their third wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. They had bought a house together the previous year, a beautiful craftsman in an established neighborhood with a big front porch and a backyard where they planned to plant a garden in the spring. Over dinner, Langston reached across the table and took Octavia's hand. I have been thinking, he said, about how lucky I am, not just to have found you, but to have found you when I did, when we were both ready, when we both knew what we wanted and what we would not accept. I feel the same way, Octavia said. You taught me something important, Langston continued. You taught me that real strength is not about never being hurt. It is about what you do after you are hurt, how you rebuild, how you choose to move forward. You could have let what happened with Sterling break you. Instead, you let it refine you. And the woman you became through that fire, she is extraordinary. Octavia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, grateful tears. Thank you for seeing me, she said, really seeing me, for all of who I am. Always, Langston said, always. 7 years after the gala, Octavia was sitting in her office at the nonprofit when she received a call from an unexpected source. It was Vivian Jameson, Sterling's mother. Octavia had not spoken to Vivian since before the divorce. The Jameson family had closed ranks around Sterling after the gala, and while some of them had eventually reached out with half-hearted apologies, Vivian had not been among them. Octavia, Vivian said when Octavia answered the phone, I know you have no reason to take my call, but I am hoping you will give me a few minutes. I am listening, Octavia said carefully. Vivian took a deep breath. I owe you an apology, a real one. I spent years watching Sterling treat you with less respect than you deserved, and I said nothing. I told myself it was not my place to interfere in your marriage. But the truth is, I should have said something. I should have held my son accountable. And when everything came out at the gala, I was angry at you for embarrassing our family, when I should have been angry at Sterling for creating the situation in the first place. Octavia sat quietly, letting Vivian continue. I have watched you over the past 7 years, Vivian said, not in a creepy way, but through mutual friends, through social media, through the work you have done that has gotten attention in this city. You have built something beautiful from the ashes of what my son destroyed. You have been graceful and strong and everything a woman should be. And I wanted you to know that I see that. I see you, and I am sorry I did not see you sooner. Thank you for saying that, Octavia said. I appreciate it. And I forgive you, Vivian. I forgave Sterling years ago, and I forgive you too. Not because it erases what happened, but because I choose not to carry it anymore. They talked for a few more minutes. Not about Sterling, but about Octavia's work, about the nonprofit, about life. And when they hung up, Octavia felt another small piece of the past settle into place. 8 years after the gala, Octavia stood on the stage at the same historic mansion where Sterling had held his company anniversary celebration. But this time, she was not there as someone's wife. She was there as the keynote speaker for a fundraising gala for her nonprofit, an event that raised over $1 million in a single night to support programs for at-risk youth across Atlanta. Standing at that same podium where she had once exposed her husband's lies, Octavia now spoke about hope, about resilience, about the power of community, and the importance of investing in young people who just needed someone to believe in them. When she finished her speech, the room erupted in applause. She looked out at the crowd and saw Valencia and Donovan, Langston, her colleagues, community leaders, and hundreds of supporters who had come together to make a difference. And she felt, for perhaps the first time in her life, completely at peace with exactly who she was and exactly where she stood. Octavia Jameson had been betrayed, humiliated, and underestimated by a man who thought his mistress would outshine his wife. What he had not understood, what he could never have understood, was that Octavia had never needed to outshine anyone. She had always been the light. She had just needed to step out of his shadow to let that light be seen. And now, standing in that ballroom, surrounded by people who valued her for exactly who she was, Octavia knew with absolute certainty that she had won. Not because Sterling had lost, but because she had found herself. And that, in the end, was worth more than any revenge could ever be.